If clear-thinking Canadians have learned anything from Justin Trudeau's We scandal, it's that a full-court press lobbying effort works very well on Trudeau's corrupt, virtue-signaling government. And oh yes, did we forget about SNC-Lavalin, who lobbied Trudeau to save their own bribing butts? But those two scandals are not the only times the Liberals have rushed headlong into a cause without thinking about the consequences, thanks to intense lobbying efforts from their friends. I'm Tamara Ugolini with Rebel News, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Teresa Pierre from the organization Parents as First Educators. It began in 2011 with concerns surrounding teachings of radical sex education happening in the Catholic school system, and has since become an advocacy voice for parental rights across Canada. Teresa is concerned about gender theory concepts being taught to children under the guise of sex education, but the most concerning part is where Bill C-6 comes into play. Have a listen. What are your main concerns with what's being taught in that regard in the school system today?
Well, gender identity theory is formally taught in grades 7 through 12. They teach in grade 7 that it's something that should be considered when making decisions about becoming sexually active. And in grade 8, they teach all the definitions of what it is and gender expression and the different orientations. They teach all of that. But there is opportunities to teach it outside of the health and phys ed curriculum as well. So we find a case such as the Pam Buffoni case that's being brought in Ottawa, where her daughter was taught that there's no such thing as a boy or a girl in a grade 1 class. So yeah, so her parents were very upset to find out that this made her daughter really distraught. Like she had been told that if you don't want to have a baby, you can be taken to the doctor. And she ended up telling her parents that she wanted to go see a doctor about the fact that she was a girl and about the fact that she wasn't sure she wanted to have a baby. So they had this child who didn't want to go to school, and so, was really, really confused about what gender is. So
At the age of 6,
at the, yes, at
five
the
or
age
6.
of 6.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of the cases that we're hearing about.
And so in that instance, then biological sex or biological gender isn't being taught then. It's simply that this is a fluid thing and that it doesn't exist, or it only exists as a social construct. Is that?
That's right. That's right.
And so you have one of your action items that I was able to find on your website is the No Gender Identity Theory, or the No Git campaign. And that notes these sorts of failures and shortcomings that you've mentioned, where this theory is actually being taught in younger grades. And so how can parents become better advocates against this theory that's being taught to their children, especially, like you note, at such a young age, very impressionable, formative times for these young children?
So we feel really that it's important for parents to take the bull by the horns and go and speak to the teachers of your children at the beginning of the year, ideally, and let them know that you don't want your children taught this, that you would like them, if it's going to be taught, you'd like other arrangements to be made, that the children don't have to be in the class. They can be placed elsewhere and brought back in later. And it just, it informs teachers that there are parents who, really don't want this and see it as a very negative outcome for their child.
And that there's a boundary there that perhaps some families are
right.
comfortable with them crossing. Can you speak on, or touch on, any of the repercussions of such a therapy on the health of a forming prepubescent, pubescent adolescent?
Right. Yeah. So what we see when they start the kind of cross-sex hormones, that they will gain a lot of weight. There's the case of Sydney Wright from South Dakota, who explained, all the effects that she had to the press and to Congress. She said that it made her have some blood disorder, and that she was so worried about that she got a second opinion, and they told her that she could risk death if she continued on that on those hormones. So she did stop. She, will permanently have the features of a man now. So she's kind of caught in no man's land in a way. Um, and it can also risk various types of cancers. And so it's as well as bone growth disorders.
Wow, that's quite
Yeah.
the extensive list, and I'm sure it probably even extenuates from there.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't realize that a lot of these teachings actually don't fall within the scope of physical education or health classes, that they spill over to assemblies and school events, even teachings and library readings. Can you share any horror stories apart from what you've already shared with parents who have found this to be true at their school, and what teachings are being taught to their children without their consent?
Yes, there is the case of the fifth grade teacher in a Catholic school board in Toronto, who last year was reading books such as Sparkle Boy and A Tale of Two Daddies to his fifth and sixth graders. And then there's a father who found that there was a book on display in the foyer of the school called Princess Boy. And he went and spoke to the principal about it and asked that not be read. And he, in fact, filled out a form very similar to our gender identity instruction form, and let the principal know that he didn't want any instruction like that for his child. And they did take the book down from the
Oh, good.
display in the school. So parent action can be very successful. It always
Hmm.
helps if you, talk to other parents and have multiple voices saying that's always advisable.
Right. And your organization has expanded its focus now from just strictly being on the school board and issues within the school system. It's taken on a more far reaching mandate that advocates nationally for parental rights. So, how have your advocacy points evolved through the course of the last few years, and in terms of legislation, especially as we see recently with the Liberal government?
Well, we back in 2018, we were behind the candidacy of Tanya Granick Allen, who was a proponent of not having gender identity in the schools in the sex ed, and that was the time that we really started looking at provincial politics and these issues. And from there, then most recently, we've become active on the C6 file. I don't
Hmm.
know if you're aware of that bill, but it will penalize parents who take their children to see a counselor over feelings of unwanted same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria, and gender dysphoria being the feeling of being not in the right body. The statistics tell us that a vast number of teenagers who experience this, children and teenagers, like around 90% or more, will have those feelings resolve, the gender dysphoria in particular. So the trade-off then doesn't seem to be there when you're talking about having them make a decision about their long-term sterility
Hmm.
um, at such a young age. It's we don't see things the way that the government is proposing.
Right. To go back to Bill C6, now I understand it's a criminal code bill,
Mhm.
and it has some pesky wording in there about the gender conversion therapy, like you said. What potential infringements exist there for parental rights?
Well, the bill will penalize parents who want to take their child to a counselor, as I mentioned, with a
Hmm.
5-year prison sentence. So, and it also will punish them if they want to take their child out of the country to receive this counseling. So it's a pretty stiff fine. And again, when you're talking about parents who are just want to do the best for their child long term, we think it's completely inadvisable of the government to be pushing
Mhm.
this on parents.
Right, and especially if they'd like to explore multiple avenues or multiple options. However, they're not penalized if they do decide to go ahead with a conversion therapy and then their child, maybe 5, 7 years down the road, decides that wasn't the best option. And what is there any accountability for their parents at that point? I mean, they're minors making these big decisions.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there wouldn't be uh, accountability in that way. These teenagers, as they grow older, are seeking accountability against the doctors who are prescribing these
Mm-hmm.
medications without, really getting proper information to them about what the long-term consequences are. And against, the Tavistock Clinic, for instance, in the UK. But yeah, not parents.
Wow. Okay. And in addition to the petition that you have on your website, what and we'll link that later. What else can concerned parents and I guess citizens do to voice concerns or express concern over this type of legislation, like is seen in Bill C6?
Well, the first thing that I would recommend would be to write to your MP. And we have an action item at our website. Our website is PAF as in Frank E.ca. And at the tabs at the top, we have action items. And one of them is to write a letter. So we provide some talking points. It's always best that these letters are in your own words. So
Hmm.
we encourage you to make it your own. And then it shows you how to find your MP if you don't know who they are, and send it off. So that's one thing. And then we would also encourage people to subscribe to our newsletter, because we're constantly sending out videos on the topic, from people who have gone through this and come out the other side and are advocating against these legal changes, and doctors and politicians, and so it's a great source of
Now,
information.
it's important to note that Bill C6 has come as a result of intense lobbying efforts by self proclaimed LGBTQ activist Christopher Wells, who has been lobbying all levels of government to ban conversion therapy. This bill was originally introduced as Bill C8, but of course, when Trudeau prorogued Parliament to halt the investigation of the money laundering We Charity scheme I mentioned above, his government merely reintroduced the bill as C6. As is typical of constitutionally infringing legislation, it is ambiguously worded with no real definition of conversion therapy, which, by the way, is traditionally thought to include electric shock therapy and really powerful drugs, something I think society started frowning upon around the same time as lobotomies. Another thing I found was that it's pretty clear that many children suffering from gender dysphoria have comorbidities. This study out of Finland found that the recorded comorbid disorders were thus severe and could seldom be considered secondary to gender dysphoria. So, not only are there coinciding mental health conditions at play here, but many of these minors and young, confused adolescents are not being given proper, informed consent prior to receiving irreversible medical treatment, which seems to be why many of them continue to struggle even after the supposed longing for gender switching has occurred. It's clear that all children with mental health struggles should be treated with compassion, but they should not be led into irreversible treatment with false assurances that gender transition will solve their problems while threatening their parents with jail time for advocating true informed consent. Let's let parents offer counseling as they see fit, stress the importance of using medical treatments cautiously, and delay irreversible surgeries until the child is truly able to give informed consent. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. To stay up to date with Rebel content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video by hitting the bell button above.